Okay guys, this is a section on self-mothering and self-fathering the inner child after childhood wounding that as adults we're still carrying and we haven't quite resolved it within ourselves. And this work is not, one-hit wonder. It's daily interaction with ourselves in a loving way and bringing ourselves back down to the reality that we are in and sorting out our lives. But I would say here that I'm going to read this small section from a book called The Tao of Fully Feeling by Pete Walker. And hopefully this little bit that I'm going to read is going to have a useful effect on you to just hear this information. So here goes. We've got self-mothering. This is chapter 9, halfway through of Pete Walker, The Tao of Fully Feeling. The most essential task of self-mothering is restoring the individual to a deeply felt sense that he is lovable and deserves to be loved. Self-mothering is the practice of actively and passively loving the inner child in all her mental, emotional, and energetic states. Self-mothering is based on the precept that unconditional love is every child's birthright. As I mother to myself, I am eternally committed to relating to myself from a compassionate point of view. I strive to give my inner child an experience of a completely non-defended relationship with another human being. Self-mothering proceeds most effectively from the realization that self-punishment is counterproductive. Self-mothering is a hardy refusal to indulge self-hatred. Understanding and gentle guidance are more effective than rejection in achieving self-discipline and remedying self-destructive behavior. We enhance our self-mothering skills by imaginatively creating a safe place in our hearts where our inner child and inner children are always welcome. This may help the inner child discover for the first time that it is possible to have a relationship with another and that it is not either empty or dangerous. Consistent tenderness welcomes the child into the adult body he now inhabits and shows him that it is now a nurturing place protected by a warm and powerful adult. One of Nathaniel Branden's clients spoke about this as follows. All these years I've tried to be an adult by denying the child I was once. I was so ashamed and hurt and angry, but I truly felt like an adult for the first time when I took her in my arms and accepted her as part of me. Self-mothering can be enhanced through the use of healing affirmations contained in Appendix C. These are designed to satisfy the child's needs at various stages of her development. Self-reparenters benefit from using these affirmations like prayers or mantras. Ongoing, frequent repetition of these affirmations empowers them to gradually replace the self-criticisms that have been silently ingrained into our psyches by years of rote repetition. These affirmations are made even more potent when they are accompanied by visualizations of tenderly holding and comforting the inner child. With enough practice, these affirmations become as automatic as the old self-criticisms. Another essential task of self-mothering involves offering the inner child the opportunity to speak unashamedly about any and all aspects of her experience. You are invited to initiate this process right now with a written exercise in which you ask your inner child to write a message to you with your non-dominant hand. You can further elicit her by writing something supportive back to her with your dominant hand. If you do this a few times a week for 20 minutes or so, it will not be long before you have established a therapeutic dialogue with your inner child. With practice, nurturing conversations can take place anywhere, anytime in the privacy and safety of your own psyche. In early self-mothering, the inner child commonly comes into consciousness with a dire need to express her unreleased reservoir of pain. She will not come forth on the condition that she behaves like a little nice, pleasant little girl, that the prohibition that banished her to the unconscious in the first place. Most inner children initially need to spend significant amounts of time going over and grieving the detailed memories of their abuse and abandonment. They are usually in need for a great deal of permission to complain, cry, and blame. When inner children are not shamed or rejected for catharting, they eventually feel safe enough to talk about other lost aspects of themselves, such as their dreams, needs, desires, joys, and enthusiasms. Most of us inevitably slip back into treating our inner children as poorly as our parents did. This happens quite frequently in early recovery, but it is usually remediable through the apologizing process described in Chapter 12, because every child is born with tremendous emotional flexibility. Sincere and effective apologies usually restore their trust on those occasions when unconscious repetitions of parents' harsh judgments were forced and have forced them back into hiding. Okay, so that was the bit on self-mothering. And now this bit on self-fathering, I'm going to read to you. While self-mothering focuses primarily on healing the wounds of neglect, self-fathering heals the wounds of abuse. Self-fathering gestates assertiveness and self-protection. It includes confronting external or internal abuse and standing up for the adult child's rights as described in Appendix B. One of my favourite self-fathering exercises in this time is a time machine rescue operation. I have used it many times to fight off impending paralysis of emotional flashbacks. At such times I tell my inner child that if time travel is ever possible, I will travel back into the past and put a stop to my parents' abusiveness in the course of this. I say things like, I will grab Mum and Dad's arm and pin them behind their backs the second they try to strike you. I will muffle them with a gag so they can't scream at you or mumble their criticisms. I'll put bags over their heads so they can't frown or glare at you. And I'll make them go to bed after dinner without dessert. I'll do anything you want me to protect you. It never ceases to amaze me how imagery usually provides an exit out of fear and shame, and sometimes even makes my inner child laugh in delight. I sometimes finish this exercise by telling my inner child I would also report my parents to the authorities so they would be sent to counselling to become better parents. Or I say that if I could, I would take him back to live with me in the future before all those horrible things ever happened to him. I remind him that he in fact lives in the present with me now, where I will always do my best to protect him. When you consistently show your inner child that she is really safe and fully welcome in every aspect of her being, she will become more and more alive and self-expressive as she experiences you consistently rising to her defense. She will feel free enough to reclaim the emotionality that fuels her innate spiritedness, playfulness, curiosity, and flexibility. How different this approach is to fathering is when compared to the traditional approach that Albert Einstein warned against. And this is what Albert Einstein said. He said, "It is, in fact, nothing short of a miracle that modern methods of instruction have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. For this delicate little plant, aside from stimulation, stands mostly in need of freedom. Without this, it goes to wreck and ruin without fail. It is a very grave mistake to think that the enjoyment of seeing and searching can be promoted by means of coercion and a sense of duty." And we go on. Reparenting and forgiving the inner child fosters authentic experiences of self-forgiveness. Once we understand how terribly abandoned the child was, we cannot help but have compassion for him or her. This compassion sometimes moves us to wonder about our own parents' childhoods. As we understand the hardships of their upbringing, we sometimes feel like their childhood travails are extenuating circumstances that allow us to feel forgiveness towards them. The relationship of extenuating circumstances to forgiveness is explored in the next chapter. So in the next chapter, he does go on about forgiveness here. So there are extenuating circumstances, and sometimes there are circumstances that really mean that we're unable to do what society may think we should do. So I've read this book quite deeply, also along with his Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. And I strongly recommend both books to anybody out there who is quite seriously looking towards having a healthy now. It takes time and it takes patience, but it does take psychoeducation, which basically means that we just educate ourselves through reading books and through on this subject and talking to people who understand what we're talking about and mean, and also to have people that support us in the healing of it and hear what we have to say. Really important. Thank you for listening.